Okay. So, a very good evening and a very warm welcome to all the professionals to this virtual CP meeting on Standards on Internal Audit, Benchmark for Quality, organized by Internal Audit Standard Boards of ICAI and hosted by Amritsar branch of NIRC of ICAI. With the introduction of Standards on Internal Audit, SIAs, the ICAI aimed to codify the best practices in internal audit services. SIAs were introduced to provide a benchmark for quality of services during the internal audit. As internal audit can be conducted by professionals other than CAs, our institute indeed made a strategic move by initiating the codification of standards on internal audit back in 2004 by constituting the Committee of Internal Audit, and thereby gained the added advantage of being the first professional body to give a disciplined structure to the internal audit function. This indeed gave the first movers advantage to ICAI and its members. Namaste, Sat Shri Akal, Vadakkam. On behalf of IASB of ICAI, once again, I, CA Tanya Gupta, welcome you all in 47th meeting of this insightful and knowledgeable series on webinars and virtual CPE meetings. Though things are opening up, but we should take all due precautions, whatever necessary, be it wearing masks or frequently sanitizing our hands, because I truly believe that our health is in our own hands. Now, not taking much of your time, I would like to call upon the chairman of Amritsar branch of NIRC of ICAI, CA Jatinder Bansal sir, for his opening remarks. Please, sir, we welcome you, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Tanya Gupta, ma'am. Sorry. Our guest speaker, CA Amit Gupta ji and CA Divyang Desai ji of the today's webinar. My dear professional friend, students, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all. I welcome you all on today's virtual meeting, which is organized by the Internal Audit Standard Board of the ICAI and hosted by the Amritsar branch on Standards on Internal Audit, Benchmark for Quality. Members, today's meeting is very important as it will cover practical aspects like nature of assurance, Standard on Internal Audit 110, Internal Controls SIA 120, Planning the Internal Audit Assignment SIA 310, and Internal Audit Evidence, which although it is the last but is not the least, SIA 320. Members, keeping in view the expectation of the government and other regulatory bodies like NAFRA, SABI, CBI, the importance of the audit, which will be backed by the various internal control, evidence, documents, assignments, etc., will be helpful to prove the benchmark for our quality audit. Our guest speaker, CA Amit Gupta ji and CA Divyang Desai ji will enlighten today to the members with his knowledge and experience on the SIA 1110, 120, 310 and 320. Members, although government is taking it very seriously and we all have to listen this very carefully to prove that our audit quality is also very important and we are doing our audit with full of knowledge and efforts, because the evidence, these documents, all these prove that we are doing our audit sincerely with full of efforts. So thank you, ma'am, and thank you to the members. Now over to Tanya Gupta, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir, for your opening remarks. And you rightly mentioned that we have to prove to the government that we are doing the audit in the most prescribed and in most dedicated manner. And considering the topic for today, I would like to call upon our guest speaker for today, CA Amit Gupta, sir. Though he doesn't require any introduction, but it becomes my duty to give a brief to tell our members about the achievements and he had credited to his name. So Amit Gupta sir is a chartered accountant with over 18 years of professional service experience with core internal audit experience of more than 15 years. He is also a certified green belt from Genpact. In his career, he had served clients spread across sectors and geographies. Most of the clients served by him spanned across manufacturing, mining, metals, GICs, etc. He has been in past also a co-opted member of internal auditing standard boards of ICAI. He has authored technical guides for planning risk-based internal audits and internal audit of sugar industry, which has been published by ICAI. So we welcome you, sir, on ISB platform. Really looking forward for your words of insights and knowledge. Over to you, sir, for your deliberation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. First of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, CA Jatinder Vansalji and Tanya ji for hosting me. It was a pleasure to be in this August forum once again. And though unfortunately we are meeting virtually, but then hopefully we'll have some in-person sessions soon, if the time and COVID permits. I think internal audit has, as a profession, come up a long way over past many years and decades. In fact, one of my favorite thing is, if you look at the history of internal audit, it has come up literally over last 2000 odd years. When Chanakya started off his Arthashastra back in the back in Maurya dynasty, and at that time, checks and balances were something which were in vogue. Now it has become more formal, and over last couple of years, Institute of Chartered Accountants has been quite, I would say, they have been quite active in developing and putting in place standards to ensure that we provide uniform quality to the customer clients, and also set certain benchmarks in how we are doing the work. I have a brief presentation to go along as we discuss. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so essentially, topic for the day for me is are the two standards. But before that, I would like to delve upon briefly on the overview of internal audit and the SIAs before getting into the specifics. So, what has changed internal audit over last many years? I think one thing which has happened is Companies Act has become the fundamental benchmark for setting in place the internal audit standards. Second is expectation of shareholders and other stakeholders. And third one is more vigilant regulators. So there are regulators who are asking questions, and you would have seen in the recent media news around all of it. So Companies Act 1956 essentially didn't lay any specific reporting responsibility on the boards, audit committees, and independent directors. Only thing was, under CARO, external auditor was supposed to respond on adequacy of internal control and internal audits, while Companies Act 2013 and read with the rules of 2014 has put in place adequate stuff around responsibility for internal audit and IFC, internal financial controls. So internal financial controls essentially ensure that there is due focus on internal controls, consequently on the internal audit. And there are different sections, so be it section 134, which talks about the responsibility of directors in director's responsibility statement to lay down adequate internal financial controls to be followed by the company, and whether they are working effectively, especially in case of listed companies. Also, under Companies Act rules of 2014, Rule 857 requires that board should report on adequacy of internal financial controls with reference to the financial statements. Under Section 177 of the Companies Act, the audit committee is required to evaluate the internal financial controls and risk management systems. They need to discuss and report on the audits performed by internal auditors regarding internal control systems, the scope of audit, observations of the audit, and review of financial statements before submission to the board. Also, they need to discuss any kind of related issue with internal and statutory auditors and the management. And this is more so with regards to the listed companies. Statutory auditors, any which way, are required to report on adequacy of IFC and operating effectiveness of these controls. Independent directors under Schedule 4 are also required to satisfy themselves with regards to integrity of the financial information and the financial controls. So all of these different things put in place impetus on the internal financial controls. The next slide, which is where we are talking about internal audit, Section 138 specifies certain class of companies which are required to appoint internal auditors, and this includes every listed company, every unlisted company which is having a paid up capital of 50 crores or more, or income of 200 crore or more during the previous year, or which has public financial borrowing of 100 crore plus, or deposits which are in excess of 25 crores at any point in time during previous year. Likewise, every private company having turnover of more than 200 crore or borrowings from public financial institutions in excess of 100 crores or more during previous year are required to have adequate internal audit system. Now, these things are something which ensure that our members of the institute put in place adequate stuff around internal audit. Now, the next part is standards. So, to ensure that all the members are following certain minimum requirements, CA Institute has defined SIAs, or standards on internal audit. And while Section 138 requires that internal audit should be there, but then it is the institute's responsibility to ensure that there is adequate stuff available with the members to ensure that they are doing quality internal audit. At this point in time, ICAI has recommended the adoption of SIAs by members and by the non-members also, to ensure a consistent approach and quality in discharge of professional duties. As with the clearance from government or nodal ministries, these may be made mandatory in a phased manner over a period of time, but then that is something which is yet to come. Moving ahead, the first standard that I have for today is SIA 110 with regards to nature of assurance. So the need for this particular standard was essentially driven by the fact that in our day-to-day work as internal auditors, we provide assurance to different stakeholders, be it the clients or the companies or any kind of regulator or any other body, whosoever is appointing us. We are giving them an opinion or a view. So this particular standard is essentially to ensure that we are giving a consistent opinion, and which is formalized and not really ad hoc. So if you look at the definition, it actually says that internal audit assurance assignment refers to an assignment in which the internal auditor expresses an opinion. This is just to ensure that there is an enhanced confidence to the users or the stakeholders about outcome of the internal audit. The assurance is provided by indicating how evaluation of subject matter of audit has been done, what and how it measures up against any kind of benchmark criteria. Also, this requires the members to issue a formal internal audit report, including the appointment, including the opinion. What it does not include is any assignment which is more around very specific area of review. So, for example, if I am doing internal audit of a company, now if management tells me that besides this, can you very specifically, pointedly do a review of maybe supply chain? Now, if it doesn't form part of my internal audit assignment, for this particular area, unless it is part of the internal audit, I will not issue an internal audit report. I will issue a process review report. Any kind of assignment which is by any other standard, so any kind of agreed upon procedure, for example, or any kind of utilization review, those will not get covered as part of internal audit assurance. Third one is a review of any kind of regulatory filings or compliance reports, where only a report of non-compliance is submitted, will not form part of nature of assurance. And any kind of consulting or advisory assignment, which is not in the nature of internal audit, will not get covered here. So this particular standard applies only to pure play IA assignments. It doesn't pertain to any other non-IA assignments. The main objective of this standard is to ensure that there is adequate clarity on whether the internal auditor can provide any assurance at all or not. There are certain basic fundamental requirements which must be satisfied to be able to provide the assurance. And third is what kind of or nature of assurance which can be provided, be it reasonable or limited, and under what different circumstances. So it is not that for any kind of assignment, I'll give a standard cover letter which will satisfy my purpose. It has to be based on the type of work that I'm doing, and that is how it should come up. So if you look at the nature of assurance, there are different components which are required to ensure that it is forming part of an internal audit assurance thing. So this is a very specific pointed three-pointer thing which Institute has prescribed. One is there should be a three-party relationship. There should be presence of three key elements, and there should be a written assurance report. And we'll come to it shortly on the subsequent slides. But then these are some things which are fundamental and which have to be there to ensure that we are providing the right level of assurance. So if you look at the three-party relationship, essentially every assignment should have an internal auditor, essentially a person who is appointed by the client to conduct the audit. There should be auditee, who essentially is the guy who is responsible for subject matter, irrespective of whether or not he provides a self-certification or a representation with respect to his evaluation. The third one is, and actually this guy may not be the one who is appointed the internal auditor. So for example, if I am doing internal audit of a subsidiary company, it may so happen that my appointment is done by the parent company. The third one is assurance user. So this is the class of person which is basically who are readers of my report. So they are the ones to whom the report is to be addressed or shared with, and they are going to read those reports and make use of those reports. So this can be audit committee, this can be board of directors of the company, so on and so forth. Internal audit, all these three should be forming part, maybe by way of an engagement letter, and there is a separate guidance issued by Institute on that, which can be made use of it. The second part was presence of three key elements. So there should be a subject matter in any kind of internal audit. There should be a predetermined or predefined criteria, and there should be a conclusive outcome. Unless any of these three if any of these three is missing, it doesn't really constitute a pure play internal audit. So subject matter is, it may take different forms. It can be financial performance or conditions, maybe financial position, cash flows, for which subject matter may be recognition, measurement, presentation, and disclosure of what, and so on and so forth. Any kind of non-financial conditions, be it output of the factory or yield analysis, for which there may be some kind of key indicators around efficiency or effectiveness. There can be maybe physical characteristics. This can be as simple as capacity of the plant or inventory availability. So there can be different forms which can be taken by the subject matter. Second part is predefined criteria. Predefined criteria is essentially a benchmark which is used to evaluate or measure the subject matter, be it relevance or benchmarks for presentation and disclosure. It can be relevance, completeness, quality of evidences, comprehensiveness of the process, or measurability of the process. So relevance can take form of maybe some kind of financial criteria. Let's say if some error or some kind of issue is there which is more than 1 crore. This may be a high risk point. Or the adequacy of process. So let's say if SOPs are defined and somebody has not done his job, that can be a benchmark. So it can take different shapes and forms. Even a good example can be something like when you're reviewing yield analysis of a factory, there will be certain benchmarks with regards to standard yield, and there will be actual yield. So if there is a gap, why should there be a gap? So those kind of things can also be a predefined criteria. Conclusive outcomes essentially refer to any kind of deliverable which is issued by a member or the entire auditor on completion of the audit activity. So this may or may not be any kind of measurable thing, but there has to be some kind of an outcome. Whether there is a adequacy of internal controls, or there is a non-adequacy of internal controls, or there is a financial loss, or there is no financial loss, whether you are giving a positive assurance or a negative assurance. So those kind of things will be there. And last but not the least is assurance report. So end of the audit, the internal auditor is required to provide a written report expressing an opinion which conveys assurance about the subject matter. So members can actually refer to SIA 370 and 380, which get into the details of reporting the results and issuing the assurance reports. So this is something which is the crux of this particular SIA. And members may feel free to post any questions they have with regards to this, and I will be happy to address them towards the end of the session or even during the session. The next one is SIA 120 on internal controls. Now, this is a SIA which essentially is referring to I think you're yeah. So this is a SIA which is referring to more of internal controls around financial statements, as also the IFCs, which government has put in place via the Companies Act. So if you look at the SIA, there are essentially objective, purpose, and definition which has been provided. The objective is to ensure that there is adequate clarity on responsibility of the management and the auditors over internal controls and how different requirements need to be met to assess, evaluate, and report and provide assurance over the internal controls. This is essentially, if you look at it, as members, we have seen different corporate frauds which have come up over a period of time, starting from times of Enron. And this is essentially to ensure that management takes responsibility for the internal controls and auditors take responsibility to evaluate effectiveness of that, I would say, ownership by the management. So purpose of this particular SIA is to provide a common terminology to prevent any kind of ambiguity or confusion on the subject. This particular standard essentially defines the internal controls, how they mitigate the risk, and how they are viewed from a legal perspective. It also defines or explains the responsibilities of management and auditors with regards to internal controls, and specifies the different requirements which need to be met to be able to provide an independent assurance on a review of internal controls. If you look at the framework is essentially same as what has been defined for IFCs. So there are 4 different stakeholders in this particular complete chain: board of directors, auditors, audit committee, and independent directors. The regulatory requirements are driven by Companies Act, which is essentially Section 134, Rule 8, Section 143, 177, and Schedule 4. So all of these ensure that these apply to both listed and unlisted companies. From a day-to-day audit perspective, I think this particular framework is critical to know, because as members, we are responsible as a guiding factor to most of these boards and audit committees, and this becomes critical. So the standard talks about different types of exposures and internal controls which need to be taken care of by the members. So this includes exposure at entity level, which is entity level controls. Second is financial exposure pertaining to internal controls over financial reporting. Process exposure, which pertains to process level controls. Operational exposure, which pertains to operational controls. And lastly, system and exposure pertaining to IT general controls. So just to give you some examples, entity level controls are more around whether company has put in place the right amount of SOPs or not, standard operating procedures or not. Have they defined delegation of authority documents? Have they put in place adequate processes around, be it whistleblower mechanism, code of conduct, any kind of anti-fraud controls, risk assessment, even as fundamental as succession planning. Internal controls over financial reporting, as the word goes, essentially refers to all kind of internal controls which pertain to anything which hits the financial systems. So to give you an example, in a procure to pay process, your procurement starts from when the time user raises an intent to get a material issued from stores. It moves on to check at the store level for the material availability. If material is available, it is issued. If it is not available, the user intent is converted into a purchase intent. And basis of purchase intent, the buyer or the purchase department raises requests to different suppliers to provide quotations, and basis which, on the comparison, the PO is raised. So typically, ICFR refers to the control which starts from the time PO is raised and then moves on to supply of material, raising or creating the liability for material received, and then making the payment. While operational control refers to stuff like whether have you done quality check or other user intent check. Vikas, can you please go on mute? So any kind of quality check or the inventory check at the store level at the time of user intent, subsequently the checkpoint at purchase intent, checkpoint at comparatives or quotation receiving. So those are operational controls which need to be seen at time of this review. And so essentially ICFR includes financial part, while IFC includes process level controls and operational controls. The IFC part also includes the IT general controls. IT general controls are pertaining to controls, be it any kind of control around access level, any kind of control around your system hygiene. It also includes controls around what level of configuration checks you have put in place for the different accounting tools or any kind of ERPs that you're using. across the different parts of the activities. So, in fact, if you go in detail, all of these can be categorized into 5 different types of controls, whether it is fraud or anti-fraud control, automated controls, preventive controls, detective controls, and manual controls. So, fraud or anti-fraud controls pertaining to what kind of checks and balances which have been put in place to ensure that fraud does not occur. So, a classic example will be a 3-way match, which is done in case of any kind of procurement process. There will be other checks and balances across different processes. Automated controls and manual controls are a contra thing, which is some controls will be done on paper by a person, while automated controls are different checks which are put in place in the IT environment. Preventive controls and detective controls are again contra, wherein preventive controls are something like any kind of HOD review of a purchase intent or a user intent before purchase is done, while detective control will be a 3-way match to ensure that wrong payment is not made. So there can be different examples around it, different ways of doing the things. What this particular standard also talks about is the responsibility of board and management. And this is essentially driven by the requirement of Companies Act, wherein under section 134(5), director's responsibility statement very clearly lays down the responsibility for the board and the directors. The rule 8 also requires board of directors to include details of adequacy of IFC. Under listing obligation and disclosure requirements, management has additional responsibilities for internal controls, and section 143 requires auditor to sign off. So all of those things are there. And last but not the least, under this particular SIA, the responsibility of internal auditor is indicated in the objectives of internal audit. The internal auditor derives audit mandate from those charged with governance, which in the case of listed entities is usually the audit committee, and in line with definition of internal audit and as per the objectives defined for internal audit, internal auditor is expected to include internal controls as key part of scope and approach. So auditor cannot say that while I have done the audit, I have not evaluated the internal controls. So it fundamentally is a necessity that internal auditor should ensure that entity has designed, implemented, and maintains effective and efficient internal controls. The internal auditor is also required to undertake a risk assessment exercise at time of planning the audit to do a high, medium, low, or any kind of vital, essential, desirable review for making a basis or a baseline with regards to adequacy and appropriateness of internal controls. And wherever required, the internal auditor is required to provide an independent opinion over the presence or existence, design and implementation or operating effectiveness of internal controls, which should be consistent with SIA 110, which we spoke in the recent past. So that is where it is, and happy to take any questions. Tanya ji, do we have any questions?
Sir, let's take the questions after Divyang sir's deliberation, if that's okay for you.
Sure, absolutely. I'm available. Thanks.
Sure, sir.
Over to you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful deliberation. Please stay with us because there are many questions which we will be taking at the end of the sessions after Divyang's deliberation. And it was a very detailed analysis on standards on internal audit 110, which deals with nature of assurance, and 120, which deals with internal controls. Now, I would like to call upon CA Divyang Desai, so to take on the Standards on Internal Audit 310, which deals with planning and internal audit assignment, and Standards on Internal Audit 320, which deals with internal audit evidence. Basically, before handing over this virtual stage to Divyang sir for his deliberation, it becomes my duty to tell you about the achievements, the experiences he had. So, CA Divyang Desai is the partner in Deloitte since 2015. He had a partner of internal audit since 2015 in Deloitte. He had been lead in internal audit, capital project advisory engagement for clients in pharmaceuticals, real estate and infrastructure sectors. In internal audit and process review for companies in media and entertainment. He had led contract risk services engagement for companies in media, shipping, chemicals and fertilizers, financial institutions and private equity having large portfolio investment. Key engagement managed by Divyang sir is in lead risk and lead contract risk services engagement for companies in media, shipping, chemicals and fertilizers. So over to you, sir, for your deliberation.
Thank you, Tanya, for your introduction. Can I upload my presentation, Tanya? Can you give me the right?
Sure, sir. You can just simply share your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
visible?
It is visible. Yes, sir, completely.
Tanya, am I visible?
Yeah, sir, it's visible and it's audible.
Okay.
You are completely
Okay.
audible.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So I will be talking on standard on internal audit, that is SIA 310, planning the internal audit assignment. You all will agree that planning is the most important element when we conduct audit, because the planning will set the main milestone for the entire audit, the overall audit for the year, or specific areas, or a process or a function. So internal audit, the standard clearly lays down where the planning should be conducted. One, at an overall internal audit level, at an overall internal audit plan, and second is for a specific internal audit engagement. So when a plan is made for a year or for 3 years or for 2 years, it lays down all the type of areas, process, function, unit, location that will be covered under the audit. The second level of planning is for a specific assignment, which will be either a function, a process, a unit, a branch, a location, a geography, a country, or any specific geographic location which will be covered under the audit. So the first standard, that is SIA 220, covers the overall internal audit plan, and SIA 310 covers internal audit planning for a specific internal audit assignment. There is a difference between the two. One is on overall planning for the entire audit to be conducted in a year. The second level planning is for that specific audit assignment, which is a part of the overall internal audit plan. So SIA 310 talks on a specific internal audit assignment, which could be either a function or process, and function can be either a procurement or a finance or treasury, compliances. It can be ITGC or cyber risk. Any specific function which is to be covered during the audit period, this standard talks about that specific assignment. So what does the standard says? The standard says an overall internal plan for the entity is prepared for a given period of time, and which has been then presented to the highest governing body, which is a board of directors and audit committee. And the second level plans are prepared for individual assignment within the audit plan. So this standard speaks about the second level of the planning, which is to be done for a specific part of the entity. Why it lays down specific part of entity means a part can be either a function of that entity, or a process of that entity, or a specific location, or a unit of that entity. So this planning talks of more detailed and granular level of planning before an actual audit is being conducted. Why the planning is required to that extent? Because a proper planning will entail a better results as compared to an audit started without a specific planning. There's a difference between the two. When you make up, when an auditor makes a plan, there's a clear definition of which process, which function, which unit, or which type of similar units are to be audited, number one. Within that, what is the overall people strength, what are the type of function, what are the IT tools, either it's a standalone IT tools being used or an integrated ERP system being used. And then the third level is what are the type of procedures an auditor will be conducted, whatever evidences the auditor will collect to form an opinion, which will help to lay down the audit report. So all the planning will be done prior to start of the engagement. So what are the key elements of an internal audit assignment? One is, it is a part of an oral plan. It's a subset, because this talks about a plan at a specific or individual process or a function, which is always taken prior to conducting an audit. It is always made by an auditor or a team of auditor who will be responsible for execution of such audits. And the outcome of this entire activity is an internal audit assignment plan. It's not an internal audit plan, it's an internal audit assignment plan. So in a year, if there are 15 areas to be audited, there will be 15 different plans which are required to be made. If there are 10 audit areas, 10 different plans would be made. So if it's a small payroll function to be audited, the plan will be made for that payroll for a specific function, for a location, or for the entire entity. And it is specific to entity and within that location, function, business unit, and which is have a very short period of time completion. It may be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on the complexity, depending on the volume of transaction, depending on the type of coverage to be done by auditor, and it is specific in nature. So whenever an internal audit is being made, the key elements are, it has to be made an individual audit assignment, always to be done and made by internal auditor, and the outcome is a specific plan for that auditable engagement or that auditable function or a unit or a location or a group of location. Why? What is the purpose? What is an objective of internal audit plan? Because if the outcome is internal audit plan, why one should make, and what are the key elements of internal audit plan? The first is an objective. One is a single or individual audit assignment should be aligned with an overall audit plan and also aligned to the stakeholder expectation. So there will be expectation by the board, audit committee, senior management, function led. All objectives of every stakeholder has to be aligned with the overall audit plan, and then individual audit plan for a specific area has to be aligned for the overall internal audit engagement. The audit procedure, which will be performed by an auditor, a very detailed, a specific scope, a coverage has to be included, which will tell for that specific function, for example, purchase, contract management, treasury, supply chain, or if it is a finance, a treasury policy. The entire scope and coverage. Scope will lay down what are the sub-processes, what are the activities will be covered under the scope. Coverage is to the extent of the audit period, whether the audit will cover 6 months, 12 months, or 15 months transactions. The coverage has to be specified. And third is a methodology that auditor will deploy. All the three which will help an auditor to form a reasonable assurance on the internal control. So it not only talks about just the planning in terms of the schedule, but also talks about the detailed scoping, the coverage, to what extent the coverage will be done by an auditor. For example, purchase. So purchase will entail raw materials, packing materials, spares, consumables, import, domestic purchases. If there is a large volume of capex, whether it should be included within the purchase or it should be excluded from purchase audit. All this detail will be included in the planning. Second is to what extent the audit procedure will be conducted. That will also be included, which will enable auditor to form and provide a reasonable assurance to the audit committee and board. The third important element is that time and resource. For a given type of audit, there is no longer requirement that only a chartered accountant should be involved. Depending on the complexity, it will require to involve SMEs in the area of taxation, in the area of cyber risk, in the area of specific CapEx. So we will require a civil engineer, mechanical engineer. So different type of resource and SMEs involvement should be identified at the planning stage. Time allocation should also be identified in a span of 8 weeks or a 10 weeks. What will be the total time will be spent on the fieldwork testing of controls? Time for the closing meeting, discussion of draft report, and for the final report, and finally presentation and reporting to the board. The audit procedure will be performed by has to be efficient and effective, and the details of same should be included in the planning. And most important, confirmation on alignment to the pronouncement of the institute standards. So there are most important 5 elements. One is an alignment to the overall objective of internal audit plan. Time, that is in terms of the amount of resource that will be deployed and their involvement, the scope coverage and methodology to be very detailed and identify the planning stage, and last should be compliance to the standards laid down by institute. There are specific requirements which an auditor should understand prior to drafting an audit plan. One is the entire planning process. There has to be a very detailed, like a policy and governance document that should include all the elements that will help to achieve the specific objective, and the technology deployment and the resource, which is during the audit phase, what type of a technology, what type of analytical tools that will be deployed by the auditor, and what type of a resource that will be involved, and to what extent they will be involved during the audit phase should be planned and included before the start of the audit. Second is independent review and approval. Because since an individual audit plan is being made by a specific auditor or audit team, there should be independent review, which will give an independent perspective on the overall coverage of the plan and its alignment to the requirement of the standard and meeting the objective. And finally, and approved by the head of internal audit, which is a CIA, or an engagement partner if it is outsourced to a service provider. So the second is, auditor should have first of all a very detailed and comprehensive knowledge of not only a specific function but overall business and the environment within which the business is being conducted, because that will help to determine the nature of audit procedure that will be deployed, and a specific testing and a transaction analysis will be done by an auditor. Most important will be the discussion should also be conducted with the functional head. Tanya, can I continue? Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah. The other requirement, and one is a specific risk assessment for that function. Though there is an overall risk assessment has been done by auditor, but for the specific assignment, which is a function or a process, a specific risk assessment should be undertaken to understand what are the various risks applicable to that function, of which are the critical risk and underlying controls. And the third is what we already discussed about the deployment of a technology and a resource allocation. And technology that will be deployed by an auditor that will enable efficient way of conducting the testing of the transaction, which will help to improve the overall efficiency of the conducting the audit. So depending on the type of IT system being developed, deployed by the entity, if it is an integrated ERP system, what type of analytics tool can be deployed? If it is standalone IT tools, what type of analysis is required, and resulting that, what type of a tool should be deployed. And the third will be the resource allocation. For a type of a function, what type of a specific skill will be required? If it's a supply chain, if it's an oil and gas entity audit, what technical skill will be required, which will help auditor during the conduct of the audit and brings the specific SME knowledge, and also give a specific perspective to a certain type of audit coverage. The most important will be then a communication of the internal audit, because unless a plan is discussed, deliberated, and communicated, audit team and the auditee, which is a functional head, the entire team will not able to understand how the plan has been made, how the audit will be conducted, what data required will be required during the audit, which will enable the auditor to meet the plan. So communication of internal audit plan is very critical, and not only communication, but a detailed discussion and getting a view from the auditee on the overall plan. And the last will be monitoring, because once the plan has been made, how effective is the execution? What are the challenges in execution? Against the plan, how actually the work has been done? And what are the reasons for major deviations, which will require to make a modification during the course of a field work? If the plan was to conduct an audit for 6 to 8 weeks, at the end of third or a fourth week, where only 40% work is done and there are major challenges, does it require to change the plan? Do the auditor require certain additional audit procedure, or to make changes in overall, not the scope and coverage, but what additional documentation, what additional testing procedure will be conducted, should be identified and included in the plan. So the objective is monitor at periodic level, understand the challenges, and making a modification, but only after consultation and approval with the head of audit. And the last important aspect of audit of the standard is documentation, because documentation also acts as an evidence of how the planning was done, what was included in the planning, how the plan was executed, how the monitoring was done, what was the communication was done in terms of achievement of the plan, and in case of modification, changes, or any alterations to be done, has been done with the approval of the audit head. So documentation will be a planning checklist, summary of the meetings and communications. So it lists down certain aspects, but depending on the type of assignment, this checklist can be also be extended and include important aspect of audit. So summary of meetings, communication, MOM, all the risk assessment meeting, its documentation, a detailed program which is required for an auditor, help to understand the specific testing procedure should be conducted. And finally, the approved audit plan, specific approved audit plan should be included. So with this, before we go to the next session, the important aspect of planning is it has to be done prior to the start of the engagement. Second, a very specific time calendar should be developed in terms of when and how the adequate testing will be conducted. The third important aspect is what type of a resource in terms of team member will be included, including SMEs. Finally, the communication of the plan and approval of the plan. Happy to take questions now or after the session. The next session will be conducted by my colleague Vikas Singhi on the internal audit evidences.
Thanks, Devang. Can you just stop sharing your screen so that I can do it?
Sure. Just a bit.
Will you be able to manage that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have just shared my screen. Just let me know once it is visible.
Yes, visible.
Thank you. So thank you, Amit and Divyang, for the wonderful presentation of the internal audit planning and what is internal audit. So just let me start with, wishing you all a very happy Diwali and a very happy New Year. So in this particular section, we will cover about the internal audit evidence. So that is governed by Standard on Internal Audit by SIA 320. So internal audit evidence, that is a saying in our internal audit world, right? That audit is to evidence. If there is no evidence, that means there is no audit. There is another saying that, verbal audit is no audit. So there is, wherever there is a verbal information, we do not treat it as an evidence, and hence there is no audit at all. So based on verbal discussions, we cannot say that we have audited anything. So hence the importance of evidence is very much evident in our internal audit world. Now in this section, we will discuss on what is internal audit evidence, what is the benefits or objective of the internal audit evidence, and how should we retain it so that it can help us in framing an opinion. Yeah, so this is just a small introduction on the internal audit evidence. So internal audit evidence is something which helps us to arrive at the conclusion on the efficacy of the internal controls. So whether the internal controls are in place or not, that opinion is framed by an auditor based on internal audit evidences. Now these evidences may be in two forms. One is like it is collected from the underlying entity records, and another is like that we obtain during our when we perform the various audit activities. So for example, for the first one, like collected from the underlying entity records, is like something like it's like a vendor invoice, customer agreement, or SAP generated reports. So all those things are that the company already has, right? So we say that these are the information which we collect from the underlying entity records. Another is something which we find out during our when we are doing the audit procedures. The best example is analytics, right? When we do some sort of audit analysis, for example, if we find out what are the top 10 vendors of a company, so we find out the major areas wherein we should focus in. So these are like top 10 vendors, top 10 customers. These are something which we find during our analytics of the various data which we receive from the underlying records of the entity. Now, the gathering the the reliable audit evidence is very much important to us. So it's all about we should get an information, not a data, right? So the critical information and the relevant information is very much important for internal audit processes. Now this section, this SAI 1320, it mainly talks about how do we collect the internal evidences. How should we retain those evidences? What is the help of what is the benefits of those evidences? So this SIA does not talk about the manner in which we should gather the information, right? And the types of evidences. These type of information is we receive we get in SIA 330. There is another SIA 330 which talks about how should we get the information and what are the different types of evidences that is being taught in that particular SIA 330. Moving on to the next slide. Now, what are the benefits or what are the objectives of the internal audit evidences, right? So there are primarily three objectives of the internal audit evidences. One is that confirms that the audit procedures are as per the internal audit plan, which Divyang talked about in the previous section. So that gives an assurance that yes, the internal audit procedures has been performed in accordance with the internal audit plan. The second is that it helps in supervision and review of the internal audit work done by an executor. So, which actually helps in whether the coverage has been proper or not, whether there has been comprehensive coverage of the scope or not. That actually helps, and that is being ensured during supervision and review of the work. And third is that it also ensures that it is in concurrence with the pronouncement of our institute. The work has been performed in concurrence with the pronouncement of institutes. So these are the three main basic objectives. And based on these, the ultimate objective is to, wherein the internal audit frames an opinion, whether the internal controls of an entity are in place or not, that is being driven by internal audit evidences only. Now, these type of evidences should talk on their own. So the thing is that when we have an evidences in whatever evidences we have, right, they should talk that we need not to explain what are those evidences. One who go through those evidences, they may be able to make an conclusion that yes, they may be able to find the entire process what these observation is being talking about. So evidences must talk on their own. Now, what are the nature of evidences, right? So as we talked about in earlier slide as well, so documented evidences, maybe we get it from outside or we get it from internal records of the entity. So some of the example here is like documented supporting transactions like bills and invoices, some like business arrangements like contracts or agreements. Some of the evidences which we get during we perform the audit procedures like confirmation, inquiry, computation, analytics, inspection, observation, or a slight verbal inquiry as well. So some of the information we get from that, we get those evidences from during performance of our internal audit. Now, whether an evidence is, how much an evidence is reliable, that depends on the source, right? It may be external or it may be internal. Now, it doesn't mean that all internal evidences are reliable or all external evidences are reliable. But again, it depends on the nature of the internal or external evidences. For example, if we take a help of like certain laws, right? So laws are like, they are the most reliable source of the evidences, or certain pronouncement by the government, right? That is most reliable for the government. But if something we get like, for example, we get a benchmarking of certain audit procedures, certain processes from the different companies. So that is a tentative thing that may not be totally reliable when we do the benchmarking of the processes from the different companies, but they may not be totally reliable, but yes, they are they are not as perfect as what we have from when we refer to laws or something. Now, in case of internal sources also, like if we get a report from SAP, that is most reliable source. Wherein if we get something, a verbal communication from an employee, that may not be the reliable source of the evidences. Yeah. Now this talk about, so whatever evidences we get during our audit procedures, if they cannot be reproduced, that means there is of no use, right? So, and evidences should be prepared and recorded in such a manner that the external person, they can independently review it, so they can easily understand what the evidences is talking about. So we should retain and collect and record our evidences in such a manner that an independent person can also visualize the thing what is happening over there. Now, in terms of whether our audit is in conformation with the standard or not, there are certain minimum bare documents which we should keep when we are doing a review. Like, one is the written policy and process on the audit evidences. That should be a part of the internal audit manual. And second is like what type of evidences we have collected, whether they are talking to the audit findings or opinion being framed. And these audit evidences and audit findings should be cross-linked with the internal audit program. So each and everyone should talk to each other that ensures that yes, based on these evidences, we have found those observations, or we have framed that opinion, and hence this is the total this is what our conclusion on our internal controls, and whether these all those things are talking to internal audit program as well. So if something which is not covered by internal audit program, that means there may be a chances wherein we are not covering the major risks. So all the things should talk to internal audit program as well. Yeah. So this is all from my side. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Vikas ji and Divyang sir, for your deliberation. Now, let's move to one of the most sought after section of any webinar or the event, that is question and answers. So we have received some questions from our members, and just a moment. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so first question is by K.S. Prakashji to C.A. Divyang Desai sir. How many senior, qualified and unqualified members would make an ideal audit team for conducting an effective internal audit of a medium-sized organization?
So there is no specific answer, means how many it is, 1, 10 or 50. Like I said, it depends on the nature of the entity, volume of transactions, how many geography locations. So it all depends on the audit plan, and to meet the audit plan, what will be the mix of a qualified, semi-qualified, technical team members, SME that should be involved. So when there is no specific answer, but one has to look into every individual audit plan and then make an overall plan, and then see how many team members should be involved for a specific audit.
Thank you so much, sir. Hope Prakash ji, you got the answer to your question. Now the next question is by Shashi Shekhar Prasad ji, and it is, what are the growing roles of internal auditors? How the standard of internal audit is significant? Any of you, sir, would like to take up that question?
So in today's environment, nowadays there are multiple stakeholders who are looking at internal audit. So be it any of the board members, independent directors, bankers, regulators, all of them rely on internal audit, and which is where the profession is growing. And in fact, ICAI has formed the SIAs also to standardize the things. From what we have seen, and with my experience of last 2 decades, what I've seen is the profession has grown leaps and bounds. So I think sky is the limit to this. I hope I have answered the question.
That only Shashi sir could tell us if he had got the answer to his concern or not. So thank you so much, sir. And many of the participants and professionals are asking for the PPT presentation for today's session. So I would request ISP to kindly, if possible, do share the presentations to them. Now, send the copy, I guess. Can we get the material? Okay. So I guess this question is from Prabhakar Sharma. Dear sir, can you please tell me some sources where I can get some SOX checklists?
So the best example is Google it, you will find it. There are plenty of data sites available. Aside from this, many of the knowledge sharing sites give out all those SOX checklists for different areas. And these are credible sites opened by different accounting firms or advisory firms globally. So it should not be too much of a challenge. I think there are plenty of them available.
Okay, I guess there are not any more such questions. These mostly are related to the presentation, which I have duly communicated to the IASB board. And okay, so one more question from Shyam Sundar Soniji. How can we do stock internal audit like findings variances from physical and from system ERP? And what can be the findings from stock reports?
Mr. Singhi, would you like to address that?
Yes, thank you. So, finding a variation from stock report is just a beginning to find the actual issues behind it. So I would say finding a stock variation is not an issue at all. It is just an indication of getting the actual issue out of this. So if I just give an example, we have done a physical verification of solvent tanks, and then we found a major deviation between physical stock as well as actual stock. Now, when we are given this particular observation, then the people said, "This is not an observation. You tell us what is the actual observation. You need to find out the root cause behind this particular deviation." So we went in depth, and then we found that the tank was not calibrated at all. Now, when we asked them why you are not calibrated the tank, then they said that we are calibrating as per the government rules. The government rule says that it has to be calibrated 5 years in a year. No, so once in a 5 year. So we have done it. But then we again got in depth in that. Then we got to know that even though it has, as per statutory norms, this has to be done once in 5 years, but actually the calibration was Hawaii for that particular solvent tanks. Right, and there were so much of materials were lying in the bottom of the solvent tanks, and hence there was a huge deviation. So this has resulted into, and the solvent tanks were not, the physical condition of those solvent tanks were also not adequate. So this has resulted into cleaning up all the solvent tanks of that particular entity. So what was the actual observation we found out was that the solvent tanks were not calibrated. They were not cleaned up since ages, right? So that was the actual observation, not what is the physical variation between the actual stock as well as the physical stock. So I would say this is the just a starting point to find out the actual issue out of the this exercise.
Okay, thank you, Vikas ji. Hope Shyam Sundar ji have got the answer. Now there are two questions which is kind of related. One by M. Premanand ji and one by CA Muhammad Aseem Nehal ji. And they state, can a statutory auditor rely on the internal audit report even if the internal audit is not mandatory for the company? And to what extent an statutory auditor can take references from internal audit?
I think this is something wherein the statutory auditor will have to go by the standard defined by ICAI. So the auditing standards play a large role there, and the auditing standards are actually clear that the statutory auditor can rely on the work of internal auditor. It doesn't differentiate between whether it is mandatory or not mandatory, but with obviously cross checks, they can rely on the work of internal auditor.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Now the next question is from Rajagopalaji. Generally, internal audit means only verification of financial records. Is there any necessity to verify process audit or HR related activities? Please clarify.
So if you look at the standard on internal controls, SIA 120, essentially what it talks about is the internal auditor has to look at not only the internal controls over financial reporting, but also has to look at entry level controls, process level controls, and operational controls. So the scope of internal audit nowadays, aside from whatever was the historic thing, that the auditor comes, does the vouching verification of vouchers, and look at only the accounting records is the age-old scenario. Today, both the Companies Act and the standards on internal audit require auditors to look at the business processes. And these can vary from be it manufacturing, be it any kind of HR-related processes, be it payroll, be it talent acquisition. It can be anything and everything. So the work of internal audit is now elongated to include everything which goes on in an organization, which may have impact on both financial and non-financial activities. In fact, now there are guidances which are coming out with regards to even climate and sustainability, where internal audit has to play a large role. In fact, the regulators are evaluating whether to come out with some kind of a requirement around internal audit, getting into those streams as well.
Just one question from my side.
Yes,
what
sir.
you suggest, as an internal auditor, we have to look into the national or international market scenario regarding that particular industry at that time, or we have to ignore that?
So the thing is, when you are doing internal audit, you have to benchmark the processes, and it includes both internal as well as external environment. And external environment can be as varied as global scenarios. So, for example, if you take the case of oil, now let's say somebody is a big consumer of oil. So ideally, you should go for price hedging to ensure that you are mitigating your risk of any kind of price fluctuations. And that is where you will have to go for both the global and the India scenario with regards to oil hedges which are available. Similarly, if you're looking at, if it's a company which is engaged into travel or tourism, you will have a significant amount of currency. Now that currency hedge, you have to do, and that is where you have to look at the global scenarios as well. Or let's say if it is a pharmaceutical-based pharma manufacturer, where if your sales are happening all over the world, or your manufacturing bases are across the world, you have to look at how different other geographies are looking at the things. If you are selling your products predominantly in Africa, you do have to look at how pandemic is shaping up across the world, or how pirates are coming up in what do you say? In, let's say, something like Somalia and those territories, which can impact your transshipment. So,
and I think that the government policies are also to be considered while doing internal audit, because sometimes the government policies changes your entire industry.
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at the SIAs, it actually says that when you're doing planning for an internal audit, you have to look at or you have to do a risk assessment to identify what is going to create more impact or what is high risk to the business, and which is where, based on the dependency, you have to look at the different policies or different external stakeholders. So if you are a real estate player, you have to look at the social environment around wherever you're putting up the real estate projects. Or if you are a road player into road construction, you do have to look at how government is shaping up its policy. Or if you're a bank, you cannot stay away from whatever Ministry of Commerce or Ministry of Finance say.
And even sometimes courts order by the Supreme Court of India. So that is also affected your business or your any party, then you have to take into consideration that also.
I'll give you one example. I'll not name the client, but then I still remember we had this observation in a chemicals business. They were selling a chemical by the name Indosulfan. Now, Indosulfan was barred by Supreme Court for usage in India. And we found one case of Indosulfan being sold subsequent to the date of order. Now, this happened literally 3 days after the order came out. And one stray case, I think the quantity sold was about, 100 liters or something. Minuscule, if you see in terms of value. But then, if you look at it from a legal standpoint, it is contempt of court.
It's a very interesting case, sir. It's really I think it will be helpful to the members, because within 3 days they have sold, and sometimes, no, many times it was ignored.
Yeah.
Even they are not having knowledge that the Supreme Court has issued such type of order for their product.
See, frankly speaking, the stand that court takes is, if you are in a particular line of business, you have to know who are the different stakeholders involved, and you have to know how or what is going on. Let's say if I am into a business which is into advisory, I do need to know what my clients are doing. And for that, I may do my information gathering through media agencies, or I may put a simple thing like Google Alert to see what is happening in my client's business.
This means you must have a complete knowledge regarding your client's business, client's activities, and not only the national level, but the international level, from the entire angle.
And sir, one more example. One will be an act which is applicable to that specific sector, and one which is applicable to across all the sectors. To give you 3 examples, if it is a pharma, understanding of DPCO requirement is critical because that governs your pricing model. If it is real estate, one has to understand RERA and specific city DMC approvals or a specific municipal approval laws, because that will change your design, FSI, and all your projects approval. These are specific to sector. But there are certain which are applicable to all the industry, which is waste management, which is very unique, which has been come in last year. Every company which is a producer and use plastic has to comply with that plastic rules. So many companies are not aware, but as an auditor, when he does the audit, he or she should understand, one is what is the requirement of the act, applicability of the act, and a responsible of the company.
Good. So one has to keep in mind all these nitty-gritties before the start of the audit.
True.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We have one question from Ashok Sharma ji, and he's asking how much reliability of the internal audit to third party, whereas they always rely on external audit.
I am presuming that this particular question pertains to outsourced internal audit function, wherein somebody externally comes and does the internal audit. Divyang, would you like to address that?
Yeah. So one is the role of the auditor is to review the internal control, efficacy of the internal control. One is the stat auditor relies more on internal audit report from the perspective of the internal audit control set by the company and the adequacy of the same. So one is management looks into internal audit report, statutory auditor also looks into internal audit. When there are investments, they also look into the internal audit report. So internal audit can be by an in-house internal audit team or an external. Irrespective of the role of internal audit is to review the adequacy of internal control. So reliance is sure there by stat auditor, including board, as well as there are investors and also the financial institution, the bank when the investment. So there is a huge reliance on the internal control, internal audit report from the standpoint of the operation risk and the internal control review.
Okay, sir. Okay, so moving ahead to the third last question for our day. By Arun Kumar Srivastava, in spite of internal audit system, there are so many corporate scams. Is this due to lack of independence of internal audit system, and how to overcome this?
So if they are, so one has to understand if there is an intention to do the fraud, and then it is impossible. That's the reason there is so company set up the entire governance mechanism, policies, procedure, internal control. So that takes care of the internal control landscape. But if there is an intention to do something wrong, then there are a different level of review, investigation, and fraud risk control review. But when there is a difference between a normal internal audit operating policies review and the procedure around the operating policies and the internal controls versus a fraud or something which is intentional. So there is a separate type of review being done, which is an investigation.
Okay, I hope that answers Arun Kumar ji's question. Now, the second last question for today is by Sujesh Sharma ji, and he's asking, IFC and internal audit covered same area, whether their scope are different, and is there a delicacy and overlapping in methodology and process conducting both the audit?
There is a fundamental difference between IFC and internal audit. IFC is more focused only on internal controls over financial reporting and the operational controls related to that, while internal audit looks at the overall, not only the internal controls framework, but also business effectiveness of the controls. Now, IFC, for example, it may seek to have 8 or 9 key controls which are relevant from an IFC perspective in a procure to pay process. While from an internal audit perspective, you're looking not only at those 8-9 key controls, but you're also looking at literally 20 other aspects of that process to look at whether purchase was done in the right manner, for the right purpose, and at the right rate. And did the material came in at the right time? So you have to look at holistically all aspects of the process. That is the key difference between a IFC and an internal audit. Tanya ji, you are on mute.
Yes, sir. So there was another question by Sujesh Sharma ji. Is there a delicacy and overlapping in methodology and process conducting both the audit?
So there is a bit of overlap. I won't say no, but the objectives are different, and I think IFC is a limited objective thing, while internal audit is a overarching encompassing multiple things. So methodology for internal audit will be little more wider than regular IFC.
Okay. So the last one by Santosh Khandelwal ji. In case of in-house internal audit department, SIAs definitely provide guidance for conducting audits, but at times we don't need to follow various requirements of SIA. The reason being the department is internal and there is no need to fulfill formal requirements. In such scenario, what is the regulatory implication for non-following the requirement of SIA?
At this point in time, ICAI has not made SIAs mandatory for members of the institute. These are recommendatory, but good to have just to ensure that we are delivering adequate quality and comprehensiveness consistently. So nobody will hold it against the member, but then it is preferable to follow the SIAs to ensure that we are doing the right thing.
Atulji, one question from my side is there. While doing the stock audit, what type of evidence that the stock was there lying physically at the time of the stock audit? What type of evidence we have to kept?
Sir, seeing is believing. Whatever you see is the evidence.
I have seen, when I have done the audit, stock was there. But after some time, somebody has told that there was no stock. And various agencies were involved, and they called the CS. They told that the stock was already there, was not there, and you have done this wrong audit. What type of evidence you suggest for that?
So ideally, you should have those signed off stock sheets, which are countersigned by different people who are physically there. Yeah. Which includes not only the auditor but also the custodian of the stock. It also includes somebody from the management who should say that stock is there. And if you have done those 2 or 3 things to ensure that those sign-offs are there, and then cut-off processes. So whatever.
So actually, what we are doing the pics of that stock with the senior manager or with some owners of that. We are doing this thing. It is okay, or we have to do something more?
Sir, if you can't rely on the people, I think that's the only way to do it. And with COVID, I think the better thing is you can actually do a web-based recording of the stocks.
Yeah, recording of the stock. Yeah. Because we are taking the pics of the stock with the manager and with our staff. because we have personally visited a godown or something, a factory, and we have checked the stock, and the stock was lying at that time when we have physically verified it.
Right. No, but then what happens is, Jatinderji, when you do the verification, you may have found it, but let's say there are cartons. What exactly is inside the cartons? You cannot do that cross check for every piece of box. You can only do on test check basis.
We can only check the test check now. We can't check all the records.
Yeah.
We can only just a test check.
That's true.
10 to 20% we can check.
Maximum 5 or 10% you can check. Beyond that is always a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you have to understand the about the management also, and most probably if you are doing this bank audit as a stock audit for the bank, so we always try to check whether the limit was always at the peak or it is come down at any time of the year.
Absolutely. That is true. That becomes critical.
Yeah. What other kind of suggestion from your side?
Divyangji?
So the best way is to involve an independent person from the custodian. So like Amit said, one should be the custodian, another should be the user department personnel, and third should be the independent person from both user as well as custodian. So normally the best practice is to involve a finance personnel in that, right? And one is used. So that particular physical verification sheet is signed off by all the 4 people that demonstrate, yes, we have done the physical verification. So that is, I think, the best benchmark practice.
Sir, employees will definitely sign whatever the manager will say, or owner of the that will say. They will definitely sign the documents.
No, the independent person will not sign off. No, the finance person will not sign off. Custodian may sign off, user may sign off, but the finance person will not sign off.
Who will be the finance person?
Whoever it, because they are the independent personnel from the.
No,
user.
I totally, Jatinderji, I totally agree with you. There are times when all of those guys are under pressure to sign off. So yeah. I think as a professional, at times you have to take a stand that whether you should do that work or not.
Yeah.
It's as simple as I remember. It happened with us also recently. One of my wife is a practicing CA. So something came to her for valuation. She is also a registered valuer. And the end user is the government of India. As a policy, her risk appetite is, I'll not sign off anything where government of India is involved because there are regulatory reasons involved. And regulators are there in the picture. So she refused.
Right.
So ultimately, it depends on your comfort zone. Whatever you are comfortable, whatever you are, I would say, forget about the financial consequences, but then...
No, I am only concerned with the evidence, nothing else. But to safer side, to keep in my record that these are the evidence. When I have done the audit, the stock was there.
Sir, I think nowadays everybody carries a smartphone. If you believe that you need to keep those evidences, as well take videos or...
From the last 2-3 years, we are doing the same thing. We are taking the videos and the photographs of the stock because the timing is there. So we are safe on that.
No, I totally agree. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So I guess we are moving towards the end of the session, and there are many more questions which have popped up while this question answer round. But considering the time constraint, I would like to first of all extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the participants for patient hearing, and I hope that you all got the answers to your queries. And secondly, to Amit sir, Divyang sir, and Vikas sir for taking your precious time out from your busy schedule and providing all of us with your insights and knowledge about internal audit standards and how we should take precautions while doing the same and provide the best possible service to our clients. And and to Arun ji and the technical support for providing the required support for the smooth conduction of this event. And with this, I would like to end today's session and hope you all have thoroughly enjoyed and learned from our eminent faculties. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning, because learning is the key to success. Keep updating your knowledge and skills and head towards development and growth. So on a positive note, have a lovely evening and stay tuned. So bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers from my side also, from our branch side also. Thank you very much. It's a very wonderful session.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.